Joined by local economist and managing director of Twilight Capital Consulting, Likukela. Mr. Likukela, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Now, briefly, what do you consider as some of the highlights of the budget speech?
Yes, today's budget speech was one of the most anticipated budgets. And to really summarize it, one would say it was a tough budget, but a hopeful one, because on one hand, they had to make some tough decisions. Some tough decisions have to be taken, but on the other hand, some good news also have to be shared. Correct. So in terms of really what are the main highlights, what one would put would be the increase in VAT. It has been anticipated already, but today it was confirmed. So the minister announced a VAT increase of 1 percentage point from 14% to 15%. Now remember, it has been flat for the past 25 years. This is the first time it was amended or adjusted. Now, this was done so as to bring in some much-needed revenue. As you know, the South African budget has been in a shortfall of about 50 billion, which after being revised went to 48. But the VAT is expected to bring in the much-needed funds in the region of 27 billion. Now, that is the main increase in the taxes. There are other increases in taxes as well, but they are minor. But if you put them all together, they stand a very great chance of really helping to bring in the much-needed revenue. But on the side of the good news, of course, we've seen that if you increase VAT, of course, it is going to put a lot of people in a very awkward situation, in a difficult situation. But again, the minister also announced some of the measures to mitigate that impact.
On the part of New Hope, primarily with looking at VAT and some of the new tax increases that were implemented, what is the silver lining that you see currently in terms of what you've picked up from the budget, primarily looking at what's hovering over the South African economy at the moment?
Yes, the South African economy has gone through a lot of late, and the budget really needed to put across a message to calm the nerves of both local and international players. Remember all the uncertainty that resulted from the political happenings, and also some change in political policies affected business. And so the budget has to come in to try and portray a message there to tell people, to tell international investors that the government was in charge and they are going to do something about it. Now, if you look in terms of VAT, yes, it might have some negative impact, but also the minister hastened to say that they are doing this for the good of all in the long term. So in the short term, you might see that it might have some impact, but in the long term, you will see that it's going to have some benefit, because once the effect starts to settle in, it is going to provide government with much needed resources to enable and put a conducive environment for business to thrive. And this is exactly what the government really need right now, because it is going to serve both the political and the business community.
Correct. Now, bringing it back home, what do you expect, or what do you think that this might, or how might this actually impact us here at home?
The impact of the VAT, for example, is very much direct to Namibia, because remember that an increase in VAT basically means, or it's going to translate into an increase in cost of living. Now, as you know, that Namibia imports quite a large amount of consumables from South Africa, which with this increase in VAT, Namibia will start to import these things at an increased cost as well, which is going to directly affect our local prices here. Now, for South Africa, the impact of VAT has been mitigated by the fact that some of the foodstuff has remained zero-rated. The minister has also announced an increase in social grants, and also he announced fee-free education. Now, these are components that affect households. So by smoothening them, the minister's aim is to limit or minimize the impact of VAT. That's for South Africa. But for Namibia, unless mitigating factors are put in place, otherwise the impact of this cost as it's imported into Namibia could be severe.
Sticking with impact, how do you expect this budget speech to impact our budget here at home?
What we've seen in the past is that South Africa, being what it is, it's a large economy and it has gravitational impact on Namibia. In many cases, in many instances, the direction of the budget of South Africa tend to influence Namibia's budget direction as well. Now, in this particular case, one of the things that is already clear is to say that if the impact of VAT is not going to be mitigated by our government, we are going to see a lot of households being affected negatively. And so this already can make someone to start thinking that our minister might also have to announce some mitigating factor. But
Briefly, just before we run out of time, let's touch quickly on Syntax.
yes.
Looking at some of the consumers of these particular products, I'm sure most of them were not smiling after today's announcements. In fact, Minister Gigaba, before he actually announced the increases, he could simply just say, "Eish." What is your take on some of this?
Yes, an increase in Syntax has always not been welcome because we have a lot of households that consume this product. And of course, there's really nothing good to write home about. But you must understand that the reason to do this is one way for government to collect revenue that they can service or provide services to even people who do not consume these things. So if you look at it from a broader perspective, you can realize that it serves two purposes. One, to bring in revenue to government. Two, to discourage the usage of some of these products because they are counterproductive to society, community. And they are, if the more people uses it, the more they become not productive. And so if you look at it from that picture, you can see that it has got both
As to why it was
advantages.
actually
Exactly.
correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Likukela, thank you so much once again for making the time to join us.
Welcome.